Hello, I'm Prasad and you're watching KiniNews. How impressive was your buka puasa menu today? Surely it wasn't as impressive as what was on the MACC's menu under the arrest section. How about a former PKR DAP youth leader and officer to a federal minister? A senior officer to Human Resources Minister V. Sivakumar was arrested during a raid at the ministry in Putrajaya this morning. When contacted, MACC Chief Commissioner Azam Baki confirmed the arrest linked to graft allegations that also involved a migrant worker recruitment agency. He said this in a brief text message to Malaysia Kini. Separately, online portal The Vibes reported that the arrest pertains to allegations that those involved had set up a migrant worker recruitment agency to obtain approval from the ministry despite conflicts of interest. Industry sources told Malaysia Kini that the arrested officer in a senior position could potentially influence approvals of hiring quotas from manpower agencies. Last month, Sivakumar announced that the quota application and approval for foreign workers, including through the Foreign Worker Employment Relaxation Plan, has been temporarily suspended. He had at the time said the suspension was to enable employers who have already been granted quotas to start making plans for the immediate entry of foreign workers. The Sheraton move is giving Bersih traumatic flashbacks. Will Harapan stay in power long enough to implement reforms this time? Here's what the NGO wants Anwar Ibrahim to focus on right now. Bersih has expressed fear that the threat of a government collapse is still imminent without the implementation of reforms.
Yeah, so, the last time when Pakatan formed government in 2018, their expectation and everybody's expectation is that they would have a full 5 years term to reform, bring about some of the important institutional reform. But of course, we knew in the end they only had 22 months. Now, the concern this time still is valid simply because apart from the anti-hopping law, political situation is still pretty much status quo as per GE14.
Bersih chairperson Thomas Fann said that the reforms were needed to take away any pressure for a change of government.
Which means that there is that possibility also that this government may not last. And that's why all the political maneuvering by their partners to getting Najib pardon and charges against the Deputy Prime Minister Zahid's drop, things like that. All these are speculation and behind the scenes maneuver.
He said this at the launch of Bersih's 2022 annual report online on Facebook today. Thus, Fann called on the current administration to implement parliamentary reforms that allow all MPs to play an active role in parliament.
By allowing parliamentarians, both government backbenchers and also the opposition, to play a more active and meaningful role, their respective role, I think will take away some of the pressure for a change of government.
Fann added that another low-hanging fruit was the Constituency Development Fund. This would provide all lawmakers with allocations for development projects and assistance for their constituencies. While the CDF was part of Pakatan Harapan's manifesto, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim did not announce funds for opposition MPs in the retabling of Budget 2023. We've all heard about the pay later schemes when you go shopping, but unfortunately for Shafi Abdullah, his tax bill appears to be under pay first, talk later. The High Court in Kuala Lumpur today dismissed the leave application by Muhammad Shafi Abdullah to mount a counterclaim against the government. This is over the allegation that the 9.41 million ringgit tax suit against Shafi was made out of bad faith. This came when the court ruled that the Special Commissioners of Income Tax is the proper forum to raise the allegation that the MACC and the Attorney General's Chambers cooked up the 9.41 million ringgit tax calculation against the veteran lawyer. A short while after the government filed the civil action against Shafi in 2022, the lawyer had then mounted a counterclaim to seek damages from the government. This was over allegations that the computation of the tax amount and penalties were done in bad faith, with the involvement of the MACC and the AGC. Through the counterclaim, Shafi claimed that the tax suit was instituted against him due to him acting as a lawyer for Najib Abdul Razak. Judicial Commissioner Rosmawa Rozain today said that Malaysia's tax system adopts a pay first, talk later principle. This means the tax payment must be made first, regardless of any appeal a taxpayer may have with the SCIT on the calculation of the tax amount. She added that any overpayment that may be adjudicated in an appeal before the SCIT may be refunded later. She also said that the present laws do not allow a taxpayer to even mount a defense against any tax suit filed at the civil court. Rosmawa then ordered Shafi to pay 5,000 ringgit in costs to the government. She then set July 22nd to hear the tax authority's application to obtain a summary judgment against Shafi to recover the 9.41 million ringgit. Rosmawa also set June 22nd for case management of the matter. The 66 crash report being declassified is a good thing, according to Lim Kit Siang, but he believes perhaps it's several decades late. Lim Kit Siang praised the government for being transparent after it released the investigation report on the fatal 66 plane crash in 1976. However, the veteran politician said it should not have been classified under the Official Secrets Act in the first place. In a statement today, he said the investigation report into the 66 Nomad crash should have been made public 47 years ago. He said its declassification reveals no public security aspect to justify its classification as a state secret for nearly 5 decades. He added that it should have been made public to explain the tragic death of then Sabah Chief Minister Fuad Stevens, 3 Sabah state ministers and 7 other passengers on the flight. He said that the classification had given rise to various theories of political conspiracies. The declassified federal investigation report on the crash that killed the 11 people showed no element of sabotage. It said an inspection of the wreckage determined that the engine was still under power at the time of the crash and the aircraft controls were working. There was also no sign of a fire or explosion. Instead, the investigation team's conclusion is that the most probable cause of the accident was the plane's center of gravity being off balance. A past MP's question in Parliament has left Penang MP Ramasamy questioning how this person became a lawmaker in the first place, and perhaps he should not be one anymore. DAP leader P. Ramasamy said past lawmaker Ismail Abdul Muttalib could be charged under the Sedition Act for his controversial questions in the Dewan Rakyat. Ramasamy said this in pointing out that there is no absolute free speech in Parliament. He also called on the Maran MP to resign, arguing that the past lawmaker is not fit to be an elected representative. On the same note, Ramasamy cast doubt that the past or Perikatan national leadership would take action against Ismail. Yesterday, Malaysia KiniTV reported that Ismail had, among others, submitted a parliamentary query asking the government to justify its rationale for recognizing citizens born after Malaysia's independence regardless of skin colour. Ramasamy said citizenship is not rocket science and the process does not involve skin colour. Meanwhile, Ismail also queried why Chinese new villages were still being maintained and whether communism still exists in those places. To this, Ramasamy said these were set up during the emergency to stop the communist harassment of villagers. Ramasamy accused Ismail of attempting to cast racial aspersions on the hardworking and diligent Chinese community. Since 2016, over R1 million has been awarded to families of those who died in custody. However, it's unknown if the money has actually reached the families. The courts have awarded families of custodial death victims a total of 1.54 million ringgit across 3 separate civil suits since 2016. De facto Law Minister Azalina Othman Said said all 3 cases have been resolved. However, she said the police cannot be sure whether the compensation money has been paid to the victim's next of kin or if there is still an appeal from the lawyers. She said this in a written parliamentary reply responding to Ipoh Barat MP M. Kulasegaran. The DAP lawmaker had asked for the total amount of compensation the government paid to the families of custodial death victims. Kulasegaran also asked for a list of offenders in such cases and whether action has been taken against them. Azalina said action had been taken against 2 police officers who were charged under Section 330 of the Penal Code. Under this section, the offenders may be punished up to 7 years jail and be liable to a fine. The government has launched a website to combat propaganda linked to the Sulu claimants. This is because, according to Minister Azalina, the group has not been truthful. The government is taking action through a special secretariat on media and diplomatic relations to address claims made by the Sulu group. This was revealed by Minister in the Prime Minister's Department in charge of legal and institutional reform, Azalina Othman Said. She said this was because the claimants made various untrue statements, twisted the interpretation of history and tarnished Malaysia's image. Azalina said the Legal Affairs Division, the Foreign Ministry and the Communications and Digital Ministry have launched Malaysia's website www.malaysiasulukcase.gov.my. When launching the website at Perdana Putrajaya yesterday, she said this website provides correct and authentic facts, rebuts accusations by claimants, and will enable all to follow the progress of this case transparently and truthfully. Also present were Foreign Minister Zamri Abdul Qadir and Communications and Digital Minister Fahmi Fadzal. Meanwhile, Fahmi said his ministry played a role in the communication planning aspect in the development of the website. On the other hand, Zamri said his ministry was responsible for planning and implementing measures to deal with the claims. He said this is the decision of the cabinet for them to work together as a team. And that is all from me today. For more stories, you can go to KiniTV.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook for the latest news updates. If you'd like to support independent media, do consider subscribing to MalaysiaKini.com. I'm Prasad. Thank you for watching.